Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Coach and Benway podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about the university and us grads, our relationship to university. Benway, why don't you take it away?
Yeah, this is more about life after university and how you're going to be, shall we say, wittingly, unwittingly, forced, or just by osmosis, going to have a relationship with it and what it's going to be like. And frankly, what kind of drove this in me is the fact that I get not one, not two, but three different magazines from my university.
Yeah.
One is the normal alumni magazine. One is more about, hey, let's give you more of a deep dive in what student life is going to be. It really feels like a hello fellow kids kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the third one, I can't even remember what the topic is because I never read any of them. And that one is the one I'm least interested in reading. And they keep sending it. I mean, it's nice enough to realize, oh yes, I went to college and I went to that college.
Yeah. I get the alumni magazine every month or whenever it comes out, every 2 months or whatever it does. And the thing is, see, they keep saying that you only get the alumni magazine if you contribute to the college. I have never contributed to the college I went to. They keep on sending me stuff in the mail. They keep on sending me magazines. They keep trying to keep me in the fold, right? And I think it's kind of absurd because, okay, this is my point of view, and you tell me if you have a different one on this. See, when I was in college, there was a fixed number of people there. The people, the professors, of course, the administrators, the students in my class, and what have you. But my thinking has always been that a place like a college is not the buildings, it's the people. And so once you graduate, well, first of all, most of your fellow students, who are the people you most interact with, they leave. They leave to pursue their lives elsewhere. And a new batch of students shows up, and they are strangers to me. I do not know them. And the professors slowly start to retire or move to different positions or what have you. All of my favorite professors either changed jobs or retired. And the administrators, I didn't have any friends with them. I could care less. I mean, they could be set on fire for all I care, right? So all the people that I cared about at college, they're gone. They're not there anymore. And the people there now are strangers to me. So why should I care about an institution that doesn't have anything to do with me and is filled with strangers and people whose ideas and priorities I do not understand nor care to understand? Why? What's the point? You see what I'm saying?
So it's a similar attitude. I'll say it a little differently. At the time, at that point in my life, for obvious reasons, college was very useful. It made sense. It was certainly an enjoyable experience. Even at its worst, it felt like a country club.
Yeah.
And I don't always mean that disparagingly. Sometimes it actually is enjoyable on that front. But you move on and you proceed from there. You have many other things to do with your life. There are a number of people in my world who just feel the need to maintain relationship with it in a kind of weird way. I mean, more like they can't ever escape it. They think that's almost like the kid who thought that, high school was the best years of his life.
Yeah.
There are people who still think college was the best years of their life. And my response is, I would prefer that the present is always the best years of my life. It suggests, continued improvement.
Yeah.
But you get what I'm saying, there. And looking backward, there's, independent of the magazine receiving, there's really only a few means by which I stay in touch with my university. One, in my current position, and frankly, in any position I have, there's campus recruiting. So I always am invariably involved in that, either interviewing people or being on campus to talk about things. It's a very professional relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Or from time to time, and it's somewhat related to professional, but it's more about me, less about my job. They have alumni come back to talk about, like, this is the career I do. This is how I got there. I studied this and I did this and I went there. It's more mentoring than anything else, but it's human based. And so I do a little bit of that. But that's about it. I don't donate. I don't write to the magazine because the college magazines generally are three things in it. One, professors, or students doing something in the university they feel need to celebrate themselves. the other third of the magazine is people, alumni of the university who've published books and they want to talk about their books and sell their books. In other words, another form of self-congratulation. And then there's like letters to the magazine, which are basically either long form letters or little snippets of, like they organize it year by year of when you graduated. And, if I graduated in, let's say, 09, the class of 09 would say, so-and-so AB 09, has decided to get married to Jenny Schmuckewartz. And, they will be accepting donations and, weird, shit like that. In other words, they feel the need to share with the university as a whole what their life is. I've never done any of that. I don't care to. But there is a crowd that feels the need to do that. And there is someone in the university, there's someone tied to my graduating class. And then there's also the university as a whole who feels the need to write me an email on this point every other week or every month saying, this is what's going on and why you should donate money. So-and-so donated money. There's a chance we could be the class with the highest percentage yield in terms of donations. Don't you want to do that? And it's like,
no.
It's like you have to and realize even the less prestigious universities have more money than you could ever know what to do with, more money than they could ever know what to do with. The urgency of funding outside of a few extreme circumstances is not there. They just want it. It's a fucking prestige thing. I think part of the school rankings is even based on potentially endowment potential, but I could be wrong on that.
I heard something like that. Look, my whole thinking on the college experience is that what nowadays especially, it's just a racket for administrators. That's what it is. It's not even shelling out good money for good professors, because most of the time what they do is they try to limit tenured professors and get these associate lecturers or whatever they're called nowadays, basically glorified TAs with a PhD, and to teach the class at a price. That's their aim. That's their goal. And it seems so pathetic. It seems so money grubby. It's a for-profit masquerading as a non-profit. That's what it is. And it's a whole machinery designed to get students on that debt addiction, and make them good junkies, good money junkies, and milk them dry and get them loaded up on debt for the betterment of the administrators. And the administrators get big salaries, and they get to do these big projects, these big expensive buildings with all the latest technological doodads that do not really help anybody except pad the CV of these administrators. I see no point in donating money to a university. I certainly would not do so. I haven't, the fact of the matter is. And but the thing is, that thing of those students, of those ex-students who thinks that it was the best thing ever, and they go on and on and on about their time in college. It's so sad. It reminds me of that movie, The Big Chill. What?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually a good example. But the big, even though I think the Big Chill is even more self-centered than that, but the idea is the same. And the thing with that, which always strikes me as weird, especially if you went to a university like I did, when you say the university was the best years of your life, I presume it could be like one of a handful of things. Either you feel proud of the fact that you had the leisure to read whatever you want and think great thoughts, or you were hanging out with people that you enjoyed. What always baffles me about that is, although I understand having a career and working hard limits free time, I don't find it endlessly difficult to read what I want now.
Yeah.
Or enjoy the company of the people I want now either.
Right.
So it begs the question, if that's what you're missing, what the fuck are you doing to not kind of do that now?
Yeah.
I mean, and if you're like, oh, I'm a banker now, I work 80 hours a week. I'm like, and my attitude is, okay, do you want your money or do you want to sit and think great thoughts? Pick one,
Yeah.
And it's also not entirely a situation where if you're not a banker, you're bumming around on the street either. There's like several thousands of gradations of jobs that you could do and kind of balance, the inevitable work-life mix in your existence. It's not a challenge as you portray it. So again, why obsess with these 4 years? Unless potentially you also are trying to say, I like it when I was younger. It's like,
Yeah.
well, what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Because the best years of your life, yeah. Okay, so does that mean that, like you said, that you were reading the great books? No, likely not, because they were just like grinding through them. I remember when I was in college, okay, and I was a motivated student. I was slightly older than my peers because I'd bummed around in Latin America, did other things before. And so when I went to college, I was motivated. And like everybody else, I would just grind through these books. I read Hegel's Philosophy of Right, okay? I spent a whole fucking term reading that godforsaken book, right? And it was a grind. I just like ground through it. I hated it. Perhaps now, as a 50-year-old man, I'd be able to read it with more equanimity. But yeah, at the time, all the great books that I read, I just ground them out. Sometimes I sporadically enjoy them, but they were assignments. They were just things that I had to do, and there wasn't this contemplative period of my life that's so much nonsense. At best, there were like semi-drunken bull sessions with some of my classmates. But all in all, you just grind it out. And so when they talk about the best years of their lives, are they talking about, yeah, that they were young back then, that they were carefree and footloose and fancy free kind of thing? What? That they were, healthier than they are now? It seems that they're sort of like worshiping youth.
Mm-hmm.
And my attitude has always been, I am happy at whatever age I happen to be in. I was happy when I was young, and now that I'm middle-aged, I'm quite content. I'm quite happy about it. I mean, sure, there are a few things here and there that I'm not crazy about, but I can handle them. It's not that big of a deal. And in point of fact, I don't want to act like I'm 22 again, because I was
Mm-hmm.
22 back in the day, and now I'm not. And for me to pretend to be 22 would be sort of foolish. And so I don't get it. I honestly do not get this nostalgia. And to go back to my original point, all of the people in college today, in your college today, are strangers. You have nothing in common with them. I'm talking about common experiences and what have you. At best, a few rituals that endured, a few little signposts or trivia continued. But like beyond that, what continued? Nothing. I
Well, there is something that I've noticed, which I sometimes feel peculiar about, other times I'm indifferent to it, is I think some people look on whether the body of the university now is different from what they remember in terms of the people or not. I think a number of folks, particularly at elite universities, look back on it and say, these people passed the same rigors that I did. Or if you're pissed
they
off at your
didn't.
university, you think that they, oh, the standards have been lowered. But it doesn't really matter the logic behind it. But the manifestation of it is people think, I want to go back and associate because I can feel like there'd be people more like me again. There's something about getting into that university which has a selection bias towards people I can understand, and I want to be back with that again, as opposed to having to force myself amongst a general population. I've seen that
Oh, that
a
they want to
lot
be
of
back with
times.
the elite kind of thing?
Yeah, I guess you could phrase it that way. And even if it isn't necessarily the lead, like a subset of that or a particular point of view, University of Chicago in particular has the notion that it selects a particular type of person to go there, and there's some truth to that. But by and large, it's not something I overly obsess about. In part because I've gotten so used to encountering people from different perspectives than I have,
Hmm.
intellectually speaking, that it no longer is something to where I feel the need to have a particular pH in the water, to say like I can only survive in the waters that are filled with people of the University of Chicago mindset, because I fundamentally don't. In fact, when I start paying attention to the magazine, if I do pay attention to the magazine, I realize how I prefer that under the dosage amount that I deem necessary, not that what the university deems interesting.
Well, what happened at my school was that I went to Dartmouth, and it was going through a transitional phase, an aborted transitional phase, quite frankly, because Dartmouth was always the outdoorsy, sporty, of the one of the Ivies. I mean, everybody was very smart, but the smarts and brains and intellectuality took a decided back seat to being into sports and being into the outdoors. I mean, think about it. This is out in the fucking boonies of New Hampshire, right? And so everybody was in the outdoor club. It was called the outing club. Everybody was into sports. I mean, something like a third of the student body was into varsity athletics. I mean, think of that. That's astonishing if you think about it. A third of the students, and this is an academically competitive school. So, and there weren't any ringers. Okay, Dartmouth never had like a big like University of Iowa, University of Nebraska football program. No, it wasn't like that at all. Dartmouth had all the students, all the football players were white. I mean, there was just no athletic recruiting, and yet athletes gravitated to Dartmouth. We had a couple of when I was there, we had a couple of Olympic skiers. Just really astonishing athletes, and two Olympic skiers. I mean, who actually went to the Olympics. And an Olympic rower also. Yeah, this guy from Argentina, I remember. He was an Olympic rower, and he placed well. He placed like at the '96 Olympics. I think he placed sixth or seventh in the finals, which is incredible. Okay, I mean, oh, he didn't get a medal. By the way, parentheses. Haven't you noticed some people when you say that they placed sixth at the Olympics, they're like, oh, they didn't get a medal, and you're like, what the fuck are you talking about? The guy placed sixth in the Olympics. Okay, that's astonishing, and yet they poo-poo it. I don't get that attitude at all. But anyway,
well, they make it look so easy, so they don't understand that. And speaking of like athletics at Dartmouth, the only thing I know about that is a throwaway line in MASH when I think either Hawkeye or Trapper John was a football player at Dartmouth. I forget which one was which.
Yeah, Elliot Gould. Yeah.
Yeah, there was like I think it was like a Harvard Dartmouth game that they referenced.
Yeah, exactly. Dartmouth was always like, they didn't care. Traditionally, Dartmouth students didn't care about academics or intellectuality, even though everybody was smart. They cared about making money. And it's no accident that Dartmouth, the median income of Dartmouth graduates is like among the highest of the Ivies. Because it was like, okay, we're going to do this intellectuality shit, but we know that it's just credentialism. And there was the underlying notion that the student body and even the professors understood that academics were just credentialism. And this is going to be a finishing school for people who are going to go into investment banking and consulting. And that's what Dartmouth was. And during my time there, the president, James O. Friedman, tried to turn Dartmouth into a more academically minded place with disastrous results. Everybody mocked him, and the same students kept going in. Very athletic and into sports, and academics were second tier, which I think is actually kind of healthy, quite frankly. But be that as it may, there are some alums who are stuck on it, who are stuck on Dartmouth. And they go on and on. Especially I've noticed the ones who have had either less successful or less fulfilling lives. There's one gentleman I know in particular who runs a blog about Dartmouth. Now, this man has been extremely successful in the business world, but he's been successful in those businesses that are unimaginative and rather uninteresting. Like parking lots and what have you. Well, I shouldn't talk. But anyway, this guy is obsessed with Dartmouth. And I understand why. Because he doesn't feel that his life has amounted to much, even though he's a very wealthy man. But he didn't really accomplish much. He's just made a lot of money. And made a lot of money in just really boring-ass businesses. And I think that's why he sort of like grinds on about Dartmouth. And he takes enormous pride in the fact that he went there. I myself,
there's a lot of wealthier guys I know do that. They think there's something better about being at the university. One of the trustees of the University of Chicago board does it the same way. I think I always forget his name. It starts with an A, but he's like one of the Goldman, top Goldman guys.
Mm-hmm.
And he was at Goldman. He runs his own fund now. he's always focused on University of Chicago. I was kind of laughing a little bit when you talked about your president shifting, basically, shifting Dartmouth more to be like University of Chicago. I laugh at that because the president, before the president I came in at University of Chicago, did the opposite, tried to make University of Chicago more like Dartmouth, cut out some of the core classes, focus more on athletics. I mean, to also much controversy.
Yeah.
So you do get some people who have this notion, and I'll be fair to, and self-critical and say I have it at times too, which is to say, I remembered it this way. It should always be this way. How, what the fuck are you doing changing it? The truth of the matter is, it largely doesn't matter after you're gone. I care only to the extent to which I want to make sure that the credential of the University of Chicago is still high, but the likelihood of that ever being at risk is like zero.
Yeah.
So, it's never really a concern of mine per se. But I will sometimes pay attention to things, and I'll use the up or down rising in rankings, to poo-poo someone else, but it never take it seriously to a certain extent.
Yeah.
But there are people like that. There are wealthier, especially the donors. The wealthier donors get obsessed with this. They love having their names on things.
Yeah.
But they also feel the need, like, oh, I'm going to be the steward of how the university proceeds into the 22nd century now,
Yeah, I think that's absurd. And they have these buildings that are named after this person or the other person, and then they demolish them, and the name vanishes. Like the Kiewit family donated a lot of money to Dartmouth back in the day. In fact, their donations was key to Dartmouth faculty inventing BASIC, which is Dartmouth invented. I mean, it was invented at Dartmouth under the auspices of the Kiewit family's donations. It's Kiewit. And Kiewit had this computer center, and it was designed in the 70s, at very much of the 70s, where the computers were in the light-filled rooms, and the students and the faculty who were at the computer center were in the sunless rooms with the fluorescent lights overhead. They hadn't realized that the servers could be like stored underground, and it wouldn't matter because they're just servers. You know what I mean? It was kind of funny. But anyway, the Kiewit computing center, right? Everybody would wind up going there at one point or another because it had free printing, and you could just beam whatever paper you were doing. This was in like the early 90s, okay? So this was like revolutionary technology back in the day. You could just send your paper to Kiewit, to the queue there, and then go there at your leisure and pick up the paper. It'd be neatly placed there, in alphabetical order, and you just pick it up, and there you had it. There you had your paper all printed up, laser printed for free. And so everybody would wind up going to Kiewit, and there were like computers available, public computers available, and so, okay. But how can I put this? That building was destroyed. They destroyed it to build this monstrosity onto the Baker Library. Now I forget what the Baker Bryant or something like that. I forget the name that they put on it now because, like I said, I haven't been there in God knows how long, 20 years I think. And they built this monstrosity on it. I saw the pictures of it. It looks like a hulking mass attached to the beautiful Baker Library. The Baker Library, if you look up Dartmouth, there's this beautiful clock tower spire. Now, that's the clock tower spire of Baker Library, and it's beautiful. And Baker Library, at least in my day, was a beautiful, beautiful building. But now they added this monstrosity just for the sake of it, just to have like a big building. It's depressing, and it's
well, the universities often are these experiment centers in like the worst choices of architectural theory. There are some monstrous buildings at the University of Chicago, and it's funny you'd mentioned the extension of the library. Our main library is the Regenstein Library, which is a brutalist structure, which I kind of like. It's like it reminds me of like a 70s kind of dystopian film about fascism winning the world, and this is like what their great architecture would be. I kind of like it, and if you look at it from above, it's the outline of the lower 48 states roughly. So you do have that cool dynamic. But the thing is, they decided to add to it, off to the side, a kind of, it looks like almost like a bubble top dome, like the top of a like a round like pill almost.
Yeah.
and it's a geodesic dome, or some sort of dome, or something all glass, but it's the book retrieval system. So deep underneath the bowels of this monstrosity is an automated system whereby books are selected, retrieved, and automatically dispensed to students at their leisure, and most of the space is just reading room space. That extension is built outside of my old dorm, and it felt like someone gave them enough money to justify an experiment
Yeah.
that they'll get news coverage for. And
Yeah.
it was a joke that we had. I worked part-time in like a fundraising arm of a portion of the university, and the joke we always had was, if the numbers worked out and you gave enough of a donation, the university would willingly destroy all of its buildings and move them 1 inch to the right if the money was worth it.
Yeah.
I mean, they absolutely would do that. And
Yes.
and it's funny. It's basically what you said. It's like, you'll get your name on a building for a while until they feel the need to dismantle it because somebody gave them even more money.
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
and this was I laughed particularly because this was at the time that David Booth of Dimensional Fund or Booth Fund Advisors put his name on the business school, which up until then was just called the University of Chicago Business School.
Right.
They felt like, yes, we love the donation, and more importantly, having the name of a big donor on it it's great for a brand. Booth
Yeah.
Business School comes out across so efficiently,
Yeah.
as opposed to University of Chicago Business School, like Kellogg Business School, or Harvard Business School is still the only one who says Harvard, and maybe I don't even think Yale Business School says Yale. I forget.
Well, Yale Business School is a joke. Dartmouth's business school was Tuck. I actually worked there as a dishwasher, and it was a great job because it was like early in the morning. It paid really well because it was early in the morning and it was washing dishes and nobody wanted to do it. And for me, it was fantastic because it was just so mindless that I could think about my papers or other things I was doing at the time, and just breeze through a couple of hours of work every morning and be done by 8:30. I think I was quitting time. Yeah, it was like 6 or 6:30 in the morning till 8:30, or perhaps even 8. I forget. And then I felt like I had the whole day ahead of me and I'd accomplished a lot. But anyway, it was Tuck School. The Tuck School was the business school, and it was called that because the original donor was called Tuck. And well, they stuck to it. I don't know, like, for instance, the other schools, like the MIT Sloan School of Management, if it was Sloan who donated, the big guy at General Motors who donated, or if they were named it in honor of him. I don't actually know. But most of the time, as I understand it, it's because of the people donating that get to name the business school. Well, it's another branding opportunity. Look, the whole thing is a fucking business, and nostalgia for college, I find it kind of absurd, And we were talking before about the movie The Big Chill, right? Well, hang on. Before I get to that, because I do want to talk about The Big Chill, but I want to do one final thing about it. Back in at the fraternities, right? Dartmouth had a big and very strong fraternity system. Okay, and something like 40% of upperclassmen were affiliated. That is, sophomores, juniors, and seniors, and fifth-year engineering students. A freshman by rule, could not join a fraternity. They couldn't rush. You could only rush your sophomore fall. Anyway, 40% of students were in it, so obviously it was like a big deal. It was the center or the focal point of social life. And, Frat Row was famous. For those of you who don't know, Animal House was written by a Dartmouth alum, and Animal House is basically about Dartmouth. They actually wanted to film it in Dartmouth, and Dartmouth said, fuck you. They had one look at the script and they wanted nothing to do with it, right? But anyway, the thing is that the fraternities, in all of the fraternities, you'd have these pictures of the previous brothers from way back, right? And, you have nothing to do with these people. They're guys who were, graduated 100 years ago, long since dead, of course. You have nothing to do with them,
You don't understand. You have to hold up the legacy of Mortimer Kempt.
Yeah, whatever, yeah. But it's kind of like pathetic, trying to recapture what? What are we trying to recapture here? What are we trying to say? They talk about traditions, like Dartmouth traditions. I'm sure University of Chicago has U Chicago traditions, quote unquote. But
Yeah.
What are they? Because it's not a family. It's not, they are an ersatz family. They are the liberal democratic family. That is a bunch of strangers who happen to share a sort of similar experience during a period of their lives, but have no point of contact with one another. It's not like the legacy I have from my actual forefathers. I mean, I can go back, a couple of hundred years and, and look at a picture of a guy who actually was my great 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 grandfather. He means something because he's my blood. But just some guy who went to the same fraternity that I went to 100 years ago, he doesn't mean shit to me. He's just some stranger, who was part of the same organization that was probably radically different back in the day. Probably a lot more fun back in the day, and a lot more useful because fraternities, they're social clubs. Back in the day, a fraternity was actually where you lived because there weren't any dorms. You know, it was like that. So
Well, I mean, these traditions can get specific enough where they're going to invoke memories. I know for the University of Chicago, one of them that for the people who participated in it, it meant something was scav hunt, and it was like a ridiculously absurd scavenger hunt, that kind of thing. And there's certainly evocative of memory. But here's the thing about that: even if you're someone who will look back and say, "Oh, I love my experience," think about in the course of your life, how many times you're going to have material reflection on that and said that was important, and you get something about it out of your life in reflection. At the most, half a dozen to a dozen times in your life, and think about all the years of your life subsequent to you being 22. A lot of us on average are going to have at least 50 to 60 years after that.
yeah.
Assuming everything kind of works out and crazy shit doesn't happen. Think about that, like about a dozen times, let's say, each like a few minutes a piece over the course of 60 years. It's almost immaterial. And yet some people probably convince themselves that it's limitless. This is a paraphrase of actually the writing of Paul Bowles. He's not about college he talks about, but he talks about how the past, we think these moments of the past are so important, so vital to your existence, but in reality when you reflect on them, it's probably a minute amount of your time or your mental capacity. That's what I sometimes get in the reflection on this particular university thing. Some people think that the university education system is the identity, the ethos that will sustain you going forward. And to your
What a
point, that
joke.
is some sense of a liberal illusion. It's the notion of a meritocracy somehow proving that, you've proven that you are a liberally approved natural aristocrat.
Yeah.
That's what will provide you, as opposed to some more immediate connection, which you'll never, in some sense, escape, which is like your family, for one, and a variety of other things you could pick, right? Um, that's the kind of mentality I'm sort of getting. I think I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of those folks who feel the need to really identify themselves with the university. If you think that the university is your family or something, what kind of family relationships do they have at home?
Yeah. Good question. Yeah, I mean, pretty disassociated if you think about it. If they feel that their true family is there in their college, then. Well, the fact of the matter is, see, I noticed that the people who got to Dartmouth in general came from intact families for the most part, and they had fairly strong relationships with their parents, which makes sense. You have to jump through a lot of hoops and be in compliance with a lot of requirements in order to get into an elite school. And so if you go through a rough patch and your parents split up and you wobble, that wobble will reflect itself in bad grades during a year or two of high school or what have you. And that wobble will disqualify you from going into any elite institution. That's a fact.
Mm.
And that wobble, that's the thing that I realized retrospectively. See, when I was at Dartmouth, I got into Dartmouth um, sort of like I got great SAT scores. That's the thing. And I was older. And so all of the admissions boards, my high school grades were not that great, but it was from a very competitive, academically competitive high school in Chile. And it had a reputation, an international reputation as being academically competitive. And I got very good recommendations from my high school teachers. And I had, top of the line SAT scores. And I was, when I arrived at Dartmouth in 91, I was, 23? So I mean, when I applied, of course, I was going to be 23 at the time. So I had my shit pretty organized. And so I pretty much got into every school that I wanted to. And the reason I went to Dartmouth was just the dumbest reasons. One is I like the term system, that it had 3 trimesters per year as opposed to 2 semesters. And the 3 trimesters, you only had 3 courses per term. And so it was much more of a deep dive in each of your courses. And the other thing was that you were required to be on summer term following your sophomore year. I mean, it was required, but you could go on summer whenever you wanted to. So there was much more flexibility in the scheduling, and also I like the computing stuff. Even though I wasn't into computers, I was into at the time when I was applying, I wanted to go and get a degree in philosophy and history, a double major. Ultimately, I changed it to philosophy and English, but ultimately I changed it from English to history, and so I got a double philosophy history and a minor in English. But um, what happened to me was that my parents had divorced, and that had set me on a wobble, a pretty bad one, that affected me in my late teens, and really just threw me for a loop. And I was unprepared to go to college in my late teens, like 18, 19. I was just unprepared because of my parents' separation. And that my parental separation, which affected me greatly, of course, gave me greater tools to be more successful later on in life. And then when I got to Dartmouth, which was sort of like fortuitous for these reasons I explained, I got to Dartmouth and I was almost immediately accused of sexual assault and harassment, which was just bogus. And I've talked about it in other opportunities. But because of it, I was suspended for 3 terms. And when I came back, I was pretty much ostracized, socially ostracized. Now, that had a huge impact on me. And it gave me, um, on the one hand, it closed certain doors for me, but on the other hand, it gave me a certain ability, quality, a certain resourcefulness that I wouldn't have discovered in myself had I not been suspended. Because when I was suspended, I didn't have a place to go to in the United States because my family was all back in Chile. I didn't have any money. I didn't have a job. I didn't have anything. I didn't even have like a home. I couldn't go home to my parents' place because my parents' place was in fucking Chile. And I was determined not to go back to Chile with my tail between my legs because I thought it would be, I would never leave. I just stay there stuck and just never, you know. And so I sort of like gutted it out, and I discovered, abilities and a resourcefulness in me that I never would have discovered otherwise. And I realized retrospectively that that wobble that teaches you resourcefulness or makes you discover the resourcefulness that you do have. See, elite institutions uh, um, are against that, basically. If you wobble, if you have a period in your life, in your young life, where you wobble, where you get crappy grades, where you're trying to adjust to a severe change in your environment, well, it's going to look bad in your transcripts, and therefore they're not going to accept you. And so the students that get accepted into elite institutions nowadays are these extraordinarily brittle and fragile young people who are very, very good at complying with orders, complying with requirements, but they are not resourceful. They are very rigid. And if you push them a little bit, they shatter. That's how rigid they are, and
Well, they're
that's unfortunate.
also overstressed. They're also
That too.
overstressed all the time because they're worried that like if I any mistake can lead to a disaster,
Yeah.
which is interesting. You would think that a university and the high school system and all of the systems leading to it, rather than saying like you got to understand that you have to, you know, do well to get into this fucking kindergarten, because if you don't get into this kindergarten, you're not getting into this grammar school, and you're not
Yeah.
going to get into the great high school, and you won't get into college, and you won't get a great job, so you can die a happy man. That whole system, creates a fucking freaky child, a
Yeah.
stressed out child. And what the system should be doing is helping the children deal with stress. If they do encounter someone who has problems that gets resolved, it works collectively with the family to help resolve it, and it looks to create a stable set of functioning people.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these universities now, it's the incentive structure. They're looking to make sure that they get good alumni and good records so that their rankings can go up, so that more people want to go to them, so they can reject more people, and then other people who, and the people who go there feel more proud to have gone there, and then hey, more money comes our way.
Mm.
It does come across as a racket, and I don't mean this to necessarily dismiss the idea of a university as such. There is certainly an idealism that the University of Chicago tried to strive for, which I don't think is something that I'd want to just dismiss out of hand.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know the perverse incentives to kind of go against that.
Yeah.
So it's like, as per usual, it's a twisted business. And my general attitude toward most people, if they want to have a relationship with their university ish, the best I can say is, think about what you're trying to do. Are you trying to look back on someone who might be a proxy for yourself and give advice and help them? My response is, rather than donating to the university and presume that they will fulfill that function for you, you can do something a little bit more hands on with the students who may be more like you or not, to whatever degree you think is necessary. And then just be there as a person to help them in whatever way you think is best. That's, I think, more beneficial than saying, like, oh, I need to know what the campus life is, or, ooh, have this building donated or named after me so people will remember my presence in perpetuity. People don't remember buildings, people remember those who helped them.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I don't care about the buildings back in the day. I care about the people I knew. And like I said, they're all gone. The people I cared about are all gone.
Yeah,
Um,
few of my professors that I really had a fondness to are around. Several of them died, actually.
mhm.
One died unbelievably, young. I was shocked. He was the man who taught me Heidegger. Actually, John Hoagland was his name. He died young. My uh, BA advisor, who taught me, his classes were very much the anti-enlightenment classes that our crowd here would love if you ever came across them. And literally, one class was called "To Hell with the Enlightenment." The other was something, basically the critiques of democracy or whatnot. He read this. He was a Jewish guy. Had us read Mein Kampf seriously. And he didn't feel the need to go around saying, "Oh, it's an awful book. Shake your hands and bring it." He said, "No, this is a Bildungsroman." And you'll be like, "What the fuck do you mean by that?" He says, "No, it's a coming of age novel in some regards." And that person happens to be Hitler. But if you read what he has to say, he would argue that no, you can't just dismiss him as an angry, little man who said nasty things to the Jews. He said, look, the man actually had criticisms which had a history to them, an intellectually deep history, actually. And he actually went through his way to show what they were.
Well, we should do an episode on Mein Kampf because I haven't actually read it.
I will dust off my old copy, and I'll kind of relive, if I can find my old notes, I'd mention those, but I remember a fair amount of it. Yeah, I mean, he would do that. I mean, but he's dead too. He was an old man. He died in his 90s.
Hmm.
But he was gone. And frankly, the only other professors that I had any kind of strong feelings towards, most of them are kind of gone. John Mearsheimer is the last one left that I can immediately think of. But he's always been doing his own thing. So I mean, more power to him.
No. At Dartmouth, I was under Walter Sinnott Armstrong, who later left. He was in philosophy, and he was big on legal theory and moral philosophy. And he didn't like me, and I sort of like. I have mixed feelings about him because certainly he was the most intelligent man I ever met. And yet at the same time, he himself was the one who told me that the pro-life, the pro-abortion side of the argument had no compelling argument, and that all of the arguments that were pro-choice could ultimately be assailed, but it was a work in progress that had to be achieved, which led me, of course, to conclude, well, if the pro-choice side does not have a compelling argument and the pro-life side doesn't that mean that the pro-life is the right side, morally speaking? And no answer was forthcoming on that one. He taught me epistemology, which was, I didn't get a very good grade in the class, but retrospectively, it was like the most important class I took because I hadn't realized how important epistemology was. of understanding the world and how everything really kind of flowed from epistemology, and so much of postmodernism is based on the fact that of extreme skepticism about epistemology. Therefore, you can, since nothing can be known, you can make up your own facts and figures. You can make up your own morality. You can make up everything. That's the key insight of postmodernism, I think. But anyway, and in history, I had two people I really respected. Was my thesis advisor, Heide Weyland, who was this German professor who was an expert on Russian history, and I wrote my thesis on Russian history, on the provisional governments of Russia. And on the other hand, there was Jerry Daniel, who is this expert on in New England history. Is a brilliant man, and both of them are both retired, but they're still around, thankfully. And they were just they were very kind to me, and they really I got along really well with them. It was really, great. I once wrote this incredibly idiosyncratic paper for my American history class with Jerry Daniel, and he gave me an A for it because he said this is the weirdest paper I've ever read, but at the same time it's really fucking brilliant. And I thought that was the ultimate compliment, and I regret that I lost the paper. It was just giving counterpointing reasons why George the Sixth would have done certain things, and forget about it. It's not important. But it was really, I had a good time with the professors. For the most part, I found my fellow students kind of dumb, and like I said, Dartmouth had the reputation of people just not being very interested in academics and just being there for the credential. And I think that was a mistake on my part. I think I would have been happier at Yale, which was another school that I could have gone to, but I didn't, because I heard that there was way too PC and that it was just very stifling. And I think retrospectively, I might have been happier either at Yale or at Notre Dame, which was my safety school. I picked Notre Dame as my safety school because it was the same congregation as my high school. So I figure, when I applied, I figured, well, they'll know that my high school is good, even though my grades are kind of crappy, right? And I got accepted to Notre Dame, and they really wanted me. They made an effort to recruit me, and I foolishly turned up my nose because I wanted to go to an Ivy school. I thought it was like cooler to go to an Ivy League. And retrospectively, I think I would have been much, much happier at Notre Dame. Yeah.
On that front, I actually got pretty lucky myself. I actually never set foot on the University of Chicago campus until orientation week.
Mm-hmm.
And it was, I actually only applied to Northwestern and the University of Chicago. Northwestern put me on their wait list, and the University of Chicago accepted me right away. And my heart set on, oh, Northwestern was the most, the better school. But my father took one look at me. He says, "You're a fucking idiot. The University of Chicago is the better school by a long shot. Go there and shut the fuck up." And I did, and it was in fact the better school. It was better suited to my temperament. And as time progresses, and I encountered Northwestern, I realized I really did make the right decision. And the other thing I had forgotten, one other professor who's still around there was the head of my department at the time, Charles Lipson, still there. And I ran into him during recruiting again. He's still the jovial fella he is. He was actually the guy responsible largely for those of you who've been paying attention a few years ago when the University of Chicago said, "This is not a school about safe spaces. We're not going to coddle you. Do not come here if you think you're going to be easily offended." He largely wrote that, and that is his temperament. And so that is at least one thing where I said, yeah, it kind of worked out to my advantage. That doesn't necessarily mean that everything at the university is important to me, or that I look back on it as saying like this was the epitome of my life. But it just worked out. Sometimes it happens that way. And I think in retrospect, you also, what people told you probably was right about Yale. Yale is continues to be the most PC of the Ivies, and the most distorted.
After Brown, yeah, but Brown is
maybe Brown more so.
Yeah, and the most distorted what?
No, I was just saying that Yale has some of the weirdest distortions I've seen. Yale was where this is not an intellectual place for intellectual experiment. It's our home. It is not. It is this. You should be blah, blah, blah. Go off the campus. I'm like, yeah, this is why Yale has dropped in the rankings a bit. Not a shock to me.
Yeah. No, Dartmouth has dropped in the
And
ranking because of just mismanagement. The administrators are clearly on a money grab. They're just trying to get as much money as possible from the students and just milk them. It's so obvious. And nobody's in any kind of position to really grab the reins, you know. I think of the management of Dartmouth and how the trustees of Dartmouth College have acted, and I figure that that's sort of like a good analogy to how a lot of big companies are being managed nowadays, with an eye towards milking the institution and towing a PC line. I think that that's basically it's a two-step in that regard, and I feel that that's what the administrators at Dartmouth are doing. You know, milking it where you have a bunch of administrators who are making comfortable six figures, if not
yeah.
more. And then you have the students being just shepherded into more and more debt, constantly into more and more debt. It's astonishing, but well, that's
And the grad students also get a real shitty break because they'll say, "Okay, grad students, you can come here and we won't charge you tuition fees," and they think, "Yay!" And then you say, "But in order to survive your measly existence, we're going to pay you barely minimum wage to do most of the teaching work to the
yeah,
undergrads, so that the professors can do whatever they want." But those are the guys who are really grinding and making sure that the academics function at these universities, and they're literally getting paid like Burger King wages to do it.
yeah.
And under the notion that, like, oh, in a few years' time, you have a chance of being a professor yourself. Yeah, bullshit. Most of them won't be. And many more will never be tenured.
Yeah,
On top of that,
yeah.
that's the joke of the system
Well, I
right
want
now.
to pivot a little bit in our conversation insofar as going into popular culture and how so much of popular culture seems to view college as this defining experience. Like, the Big Chill is like the obvious example. Offhand, I can't recall of other movies like it.
I know. Wonder Boys, but Wonder Boys is different. I
Oh,
actually like Wonder Boys a lot. The thing is, Wonder Boys certainly Wonder Boys captures something about college life. I'll admit that, but Wonder Boys isn't so much obsessed with the particularities of college and the buildings. It's more about the personality types, and it's more concerned with, uh, kind of like a, for lack of a better term, a failed author who fails his way into a cushy job in academia, namely, an MFA program. And that movie and that book have a lot of joy poking fun at the kind of character types and the archetypes that you will get in an English department.
mm-hmm.
And so that's worth it to me. But like I said, it's not a campus novel in a traditional sense where it's concerned about the minutia of the campus. It's more concerned about the characters who happen to be at a campus.
Yeah, yeah. No, that's understandable. But I, I'm thinking more about the Big Chill because they are. For those of you who don't know, The Big Chill was a big movie in the mid 80s about a bunch of baby boomers who get together because one of their peers committed suicide. And these all are people who were, like I said, baby boomers who all became friends in college at the University of Michigan, I think.
Yeah, it was Michigan.
Yeah, and they are there's a famous actor. There's a writer who writes for People magazine. There's a Vietnam veteran who is like a radio DJ or something like that. Then there's this guy played by Kevin Kline
Businessman, right?
he's a businessman. He's into running, which is the typical boomer thing of jogging, right? I remember the book of Running by Jim Fixx and all that shit. It's so boomer, and yeah, he's got a shoe company called Running Dogs, which, by the way, is a good name for running shoes. And and he's about to go public and make a boatload of money. And his wife is a doctor, and she had an affair with the guy who committed suicide, who was actually played by Kevin Costner, but the scenes of him were cut, and they only show his body, which is kind of amusing.
Yeah.
But anyway, it's all like about baby boomers who went to college, and it's kind of self-indulgent and pathetic. The movie at the time was a huge hit.
Yeah.
Retrospectively, it is aged very poorly.
Well, and what's interesting about their college, unlike ours, theirs was a Big Tent college. I mean, Michigan is a huge university system. It's a state system, which is different from ours. That it's almost like the fondness people have for that school, it's somewhat analogous of people in a city having a fondness for their sports teams. It's like
Why? Yeah.
it did not require much of you to to get there. I mean, obviously, people in Michigan are saying, "Well, don't you know it's a hard
No,
school?"
come
But this,
on. It's
I
a
mean, come on,
it's a safety
yeah,
school for the safety school. Yeah, come on.
yeah. But yeah, I mean, it's a state school,
Yeah.
and there are a lot of people who go to it, and so they will say, "Oh, that we were of a place and time," kind of thing that they have, and Michigan just happened to be it for them, and so it's a little weird for us. I think ours is just a little. I mean, I'll just be fair; it's substantially different, I think, but nevertheless, it's the same kind of nostalgia problem. They look back, oh, I was at my best with you people.
Oh
In other
yeah,
words, oh my
remember?
God, I was, yeah, when Glenn Close is crying and she's like, I know that sounds gross that I said I love you people. No, it doesn't. And I'm looking at Glenn Close, I'm like, Glenn Close, you don't love anybody but yourself.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I by the way, I don't get this parenthetically, I remember that line very well. I was at my best when I was with you people. Whenever somebody says "you people," it seems to me not racial, or not racist, but rather so objectifying. I once was in an airplane where this mother was talking to her own kids as "you people," and I found it deeply disturbing. I don't know if that's just me. I mean, this is a wild parentheses, but I'm kind of curious about your opinion on it.
well, I would look at it this way: when you say "you people," or when she says that, she's again, it's a self-referential thing. You people exist as a solid entity of which I define myself against. So you people are a group defined as this block of a thing that I have value in. Do I say like, I was at my best with you, Kevin, and you, William Hurt, and you,
Yeah,
Jeff
whatever.
Goldblum,
Yeah.
go down the list. That would be like she's interacting with them as human beings when she says, I was at my best with this group. She's abstracted the entity into something that she can digest, and it's usually just like, oh my God, I was happier. There was a time in my life when I was happier. I just so happened to be around you folks. I
Yeah.
just so happened to be younger.
The only one
All of
in
that.
that movie, the only one who's honest about it was William Hurt's character. He
Yeah,
said,
he was the vet, right? He
"Yeah,
was the yeah, and
the Vietnam veteran who apparently had been emasculated by shrapnel in the war." Yeah, and he was like, "Look, we just knew each other. We were all together for a brief time at a very intense moment in history, and that's all." Or something along those lines. I forget the exact line, but he
right.
really nailed it. He was the only character that was honest about it. They weren't friends. They were just people who had. It's sort of like airplane crash survivors. You're not friends. You just happen to have experienced the same thing at the same moment. I mean, this group of people in particular had experienced the upheaval of the late '60s in colleges, which is all basically because of the draft, because they were all a bunch of fucking pussies that were too scared to go to Vietnam and fight. And they were protesting the war. Bullshit. They were protesting the draft. And the proof of that is as soon as Nixon rescinded the draft in, what was it, 70 or something like that, protest dropped off to nothing. And the war continued for another 5 years. So fuck off. But anyway, yeah, the whole notion of the university as being like some common experience. I don't know. I am.
I mean, I wouldn't say there's absolutely nothing to it, but I would say that something is not the most substantial thing you're going to get in your life. Trust me. Um, Take it for what it is. Enjoy those 4 years if you can, but also realize that those 4 years are gearing you up for hopefully, like I said, another 50 to 60. Hopefully, it's better for you. And it
Well,
should be.
well, I personally think that people should not go to college today unless they want to, unless they need the credential for some job that specifically requires them to have it, or they need to get into graduate school to be a doctor or an engineer or something like that. I think that it's a complete waste of time to go to college to quote unquote find yourself. You're not going to be educated. You're not going to find yourself. You're just going to party and wind up in debt. It's like a party. It's a 4-year party, and the hangover is going to be 20 years of debt slavery. That's what I think of college today. And I do not understand why young people go to college today. I think that they're fools, and I've advocated against college a number of times. I mean, until I'm blue in the face, you know. But
Well,
yeah,
our society has frankly, since the you know the post-war GI Bill
yeah,
and the like, have convinced the American people that a proxy of an elite liberal education, which was designed from the beginning to be a finishing school for a leadership class, is something we all can aspire to get, do, and then become leaders. That ain't gonna fly. I mean, there are only so many leadership positions. They're defined by their rarity.
yeah,
And so, what have you net resulted in? You've net resulted in a lot of confusion amongst people who should have probably studied a trade and been much happier as a result. You've loaded them with debt. Others have made money off of this nonsense, and nobody feels particularly smarter. Nobody feels particularly more whole, and they're putting their life on hold.
yeah,
I think the vast majority of people, and this isn't about being smart or not, would be better off, frankly, in high school, figuring out what is the, especially if you're not don't feel academically minded. Most people aren't. What is the trade that you think you're most qualified to do or most interested in? And for lack of a better term, what's the best apprenticeship proxy for that, and do it.
yeah,
You know,
yeah, exactly
the,
right.
the, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because most people look, and nobody, you can't have everybody be a chief. You need some Indians. And this notion that everybody can go to college and everybody's going to wind up being the president of the United States or the CEO of Goldman Sachs or the head of the big studio or whatever, no, it's not going to fly. It's very rare to begin with, and so you have to be more realistic. That's the thing, and I think that it sells illusions, and the cost is debt slavery, and I think that that's why I find colleges so abhorrent today. It was bad enough in my day. I mean, I graduated with about $20,000 worth of debt, $18,000 if I recall correctly, which is a fairly substantial amount at the time. It's roughly, you could argue that it's roughly the equivalent today of about $35,000. Now, that's a lot of money. And I was lucky that I was able to make money relatively quickly that I could pay that off. But it was a lot of money. It was a lot of money, and it could have been like on my back for years. And I was very lucky. I can't imagine kids today graduating with 50, 70, 100 grand in debt. And they've got like a PhD in cultural studies or some shit like that that is perfectly useless. You have students who have $500,000 worth of student debt. How is that even fucking possible? But it is the case. Graduate students have that kind of debt, and they're never going to pay it off. I just think it's tragic. I think it's tragic, and the fact that people don't, well, it seems as if they're waking up. You tell me, are people realizing what's what, that it's a big old scam, or do they
Well,
still drink the Kool-Aid?
I mean, I see pockets of interesting things. I think by and large, most people are still going to feel the need that you've got to go to college. It's just been baked into the system yet. What I am seeing is pockets of resistance against certain types of overaccreditation. Like, I mean, I am seeing, for example, in the business world, they're moving away from this idea that, oh, I need to have an MBA in order to be a business leader. I think most of them know that that's a bullshit meet and greet second round of country clubism.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, maybe you teach you some soft skills on how to manage people, but very little of it is learning. Most of it, they know people are buying the network of alumni. And the reality of the situation I'm encountering is most companies realize it's the experience that matters. And I think that will filter down, particularly in the trades, which I would like to see us get better at.
yeah.
And I have a strong feeling that there will be some resistance to it. I mean, it comes across like a bubble right now, that student loan debt, and so much shit is stacked in the favor of the bank. It's ridiculous. Like, you can't even declare bankruptcy and get resolved of those student loans.
Oh, no, no.
That's
Yeah.
how good that fucking scam is. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, by and large, I feel like it's going to keep continuing until it financially can't sustain itself, and we'll see what happens after that.
Yeah. And so on that black-pilled note, black-pilled as fuck.
Well, I think that's slightly more positive. I think that's a way of saying people knowing that, hey, this game of debt is not something I want to participate in, and I hope that extends. That's a little, shall we say, gray pill? Certainly not. So not purely black.
Yeah. So on that note, maybe that gray pill. Let's leave it at a gray pill. On that gray pilled note, this has been the Coach and Benway podcast. Hope you have enjoyed the show, and we will catch you next time. Take it easy.
Take care.